Years from now, people will look back on two very distinct moments in time, BC and AC. I'm not referring to before Christ and after Christ. I am, of course, talking about before COVID and after COVID. Before COVID, we were told that the world was volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, referred to as VUCA. But in reality, the majority of us just went about our day-to-day feeling little change. We were in the longest period of growth ever registered. Unemployment was at its lowest ever. Economies were booming. How quick we forgot. Look, it's not that we were completely oblivious. We were, of course, in awe of technological giants, Google, IBM, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple in the United States, and Alibaba, Baidu, and Tencent in China. Amy Webb, futurist and director of the Future Today Institute at New York University Stern School of Business, outlined these in the book, The Big Nine. But they were just outliers, exceptions to the rule, right? Wrong. These 9 companies had and continue to have the most control over cloud computing, research, data, and the popular frameworks used by developers. But you see, the world was quietly changing at a rapid pace. But most of us were unaware. What a wake-up call. After COVID, the 1990s management consultant's favorite acronym was back with a vengeance. VUCA, our volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. Previously used and abused, yet thoroughly misunderstood. But now, we were really in it. The volatility of the markets, the uncertainty of whether we could be open or closed tomorrow, let alone next quarter. The complexity of technology in the world, and ambiguity of the information thrust on us. The word fake now used to define what we don't want to address or accept. You see, technology had been growing exponentially, whilst we as human beings were naturally growing linearly or biologically. In other words, the complexity of the world around us was outpacing the complexity of our minds. Just think about that for a second. Most of us never really saw it. Things just seem to become subtly harder. But it doesn't just feel like it, it's real. There is a mismatch between the complexity of the world and us, our capacity to understand it and thus deal with it. So how do we deal with this? We really only have 2 choices. We either decrease the complexity of the world, and that's not happening anytime soon, or we increase the complexity of our minds. Increase the complexity of our minds. What this actually means is embarking on a journey of continuous growth, or in other words, continuous learning. You can also call it personal and professional development if you prefer. But that's not enough. We also need to understand how technology has impacted our world and continues to do so at an exponential rate. And this is tough. We weren't trained to understand exponential growth. And throughout the pandemic, this became painfully obvious. The numbers just kept growing out of control. Well, not really. They were growing, they were large, they were doubling, but they were following the exponential curve. If we had understood exponential growth, we would have easily predicted what was to come, and many experts did. Understanding the impact of technology in the world is fundamental as we begin to learn about the challenges and opportunities. The real impact of technology is not the disruption as we often hear. We've been dealing with that for decades. It's the pace, density, and unpredictability that disruption brings. Some refer to this moment we are presently in as a Gutenberg moment. It's actually a reference to the Gutenberg printing press that changed the world forever. That one thing that took us to the next stage of evolution. But now, instead of one change, We are witnessing a tsunami of change through computational advances. Not one big disruption, but instead 20 different disruptions all at the same time. Solar, AI, blockchain, autonomous vehicles, 3D and 4D printers, drones, biotech, and more. That so many are happening at the same time is unique in our history. We are in the eye of the storm. You know, it began sometime in mid-March 2020. For you, the exact date depends more on where you were geographically at the time. For me, it was the 14th of March, when the police came and abruptly closed one of my businesses, a restaurant. We should all go home and stay there. All of us woke up the next day to a new reality. Throughout the lockdown period, we quickly realized that the digital transformation efforts we had previously implemented were wholly inadequate. It shouldn't have been a surprise, but it was. The sudden, abrupt, and total shift to remote work revealed so much more than we anticipated. It was a great example of the different challenges that leaders face, normally categorized into either technical challenges or adaptive challenges. This is probably one of the most common mistakes leaders make, trying to solve adaptive challenges with technical skills. You know, hard skills versus soft skills. With the shift to remote work, we pretty much solved the technical challenges right off the bat by using the same social technologies and video conferencing software we'd used before. This enabled us to keep collaborating, sharing data, and continue to work together. What turned out to be more complicated, as is often the case, were the adaptive challenges, those that aren't solved through technology. You'll know what I'm talking about when you hear this. If you ended up back-to-back in Zoom meetings, then chances are your organization got it wrong. Very wrong. It's called micromanagement through technology. Just think about it. Didn't you keep hearing that remote work wasn't for everyone? That they'd end up being less productive? Truth is, non-productive people working remotely were non-productive in the office. It was just tolerated. And as Keith Cunningham always says, you get what you tolerate, remote or not. What do you think of when you hear these words? Autonomy, trust, respect, transparency, fairness, accountability, responsibility, diversity, equality, ethical. You know what all of these have in common? None of them are solved with technology. But they are all fundamental to lead in the new world. They already were BC, but we kept getting away with just talking about them and not actually instilling them in our organizations. Technological challenges require new skills, technical skills. Adaptive challenges, those that the majority of leaders face today, require new skills and new mindsets, behaviors, and habits. One of the most successful business books of the past few decades is Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Covey defines a habit as the intersection of knowledge, skill, and desire. Knowledge is the what to do, skill is the how to do, and desire is the want to do. In business, desire is rarely an issue. Most business leaders are highly motivated to achieve results. When they are disrupted, it's usually not through the lack of desire, but rather the failure to adapt their knowledge and skills to new realities. Ultimately, their failure to adapt their mindset, to change. For legacy organizations, this means that the speed of change of the external world now far exceeds the speed at which they can move. In the past, a company had years to figure out how to react to slow-moving markets. Today, that time frame is down to months as a new breed of exponential organization drives new business models and disruption. Case in point, the pace at which Elon Musk has disrupted vehicles, space, and energy. The problem in the majority of organizations is not a lack of disruptive ideas. They are abundant. The real challenge is that if you attempt disruptive innovation inside an organization, the corporate immune system will kick in. You'll spend all your time fighting antibodies. These antibodies are leaders, invested in habits, mindsets, and business models that no longer work. Unless they mobilize the will to change, the mismatch between the complexity of the world and their own minds is only going to get wider. Once you've understood how exponential organizations grow, their attributes and business model, once you've understood the importance of collective leadership and our journey from reactive to creative to integral selves, you're ready to embark on the EXO Sprint, a 10-week innovation program that can launch your leadership, culture, and management thinking multiple years ahead. We will go through all of this step by step with several exercises along the way to ensure that you not only understand the different topics, but also embed them into your new mindset. For some, it will be enough. For others, you'll want to go deeper into the inners of organizations or deeper into the different forms of leadership. Some will ultimately go all the way to the why, to the core of why we do what we do. The majority of challenges are in many cases symptoms of deeper issues. To understand it effectively, we need to drill down to identify the underlying cause. To be blunt, leaders, founders, and managers are too often the biggest chokehold on the organization. That's right, you and I are often the biggest chokehold of our organizations. The why has become so more important than identifying the challenge. Sakichi Toyoda's 5 whys technique is a simple way to understand this. To use it, you start with the challenge you're facing and then keep asking why until you've discovered the root cause. And guess what? The root cause is ultimately always a result of us, our mindsets, our beliefs, and our habits. Yet, it is also the lack of understanding and lack of growth as human beings. Let's drill it down. Why are some tech companies getting culture so wrong? One reason might be that the CEO's approach to tech should not be the same for internal issues. Rationale and processes don't resolve human-centric challenges. Why are human-centric challenges dealt with so deficiently? One reason might be because the leaders are trying to solve adaptive challenges with technical means. Why are they doing that? Because they haven't been trained to be adaptive leaders and they are messing the culture up. Why are they doing that? One of the reasons might be a low level of emotional intelligence, EQ. Why do they have a low EQ? They may have a lack of empathy, which ultimately might make them a great technical leader, but less of a human at work, capable of walking in others' shoes. So, assessing leaders in emotional intelligence and helping them identify their blind spots will help improve the organization's culture? You got it. Do this exercise several times and you'll get to the core reasons why there are still too many deficiencies in the organization's culture. You see, most challenges will almost always revert back to human traits. That's why there's been an enormous uptake in personal development, because it makes sense. But more importantly, because that is how you evolve, grow, and ultimately change. That's how you increase the complexity of the mind and decrease the gap. We've mapped this out for you and are obsessive about understanding how we as humans contribute in a positive or negative way to outcomes in business. In essence, how the complexity of our mind increases or decreases. We're excited to have you on board, to be in the company of someone who has taken charge of their outcomes. We just ask that you play full on and are always in the right state. It starts with you. So, lean in, take a deep breath, and get ready. Together, our journey begins now.